It's much harder for a salesperson to sell the same product than the owner. However, you don't grow significantly unless you have other people selling for you.
Welcome back to the latest edition of the Millionaire University podcast. I am Brian Guerin, and we are rounding out part 4 of our series with Sean O'Shaughnessy of New Sales Expert. And today we're discussing advanced sales concepts and implementation. So we're going to dive into handling objections and challenges, creating and sustaining sales momentum, and implementing and scaling sales strategies. So without further ado, let's welcome back Sean O'Shaughnessy himself to introduce us to the advanced sales concepts and implementation. Let's go. Sean, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Brian. I'm looking forward to this. This has been fun.
Yes, I'm excited. We've got the first 3 under wraps. They are a bunch of gold mines for information on sales, and whether you're starting out your business, thinking about starting out your business, or if you are currently in business, all 4 parts of this series are extremely pertinent to developing your sales systems, developing the mindset for sales, and letting you hit the ground running. So, Sean, I'm excited. Today, we are talking about advanced sales concepts and implementation. So we have a couple different bullet points here about handling objections and challenges, creating and sustaining sales momentum, and implementing and scaling sales strategies. So, Sean, let's jump right in with part 4.
Great. Thank you very much. Yeah, so this is a really good one because handling objections and challenges is something that most salespeople have to get through at some point in their career. So I want to set the stage a little bit here. Objections aren't always bad. Sometimes they're bad, but sometimes they're just clarifications. So it's good to understand what is an objection and what is a clarification. So you have a product, you're explaining that product or service, whatever, you're trying to explain it to the customer, and the customer or the prospect is just not quite there yet. They just don't quite understand. There's some nuance in the conversation that they don't understand, or maybe they've never considered whatever you're selling. And so they just don't have that background. You have to understand when you are selling something that you sell it every single day. This is all you do. In your case, Brian, you run a company called Ricochet, among other things that you do. And you know a lot about Facebook ads and advertising and driving attraction and driving leads and all that stuff. The other person doesn't. And they don't understand all the terms. They don't understand all the technology. They don't understand all the details. They don't understand the problem maybe, because maybe they just haven't confronted it in their business life or in the way they run their business. So a lot of times people count things as objections, but they're not really objections. They're clarifications. So those are good. You want to have objections or questions about your product. You want to have that to happen. However, you're going to get to a point in the sales process where people are going to put up a barrier of, I can't go on because I understand this. My understanding about what you're trying to sell me is X. May not be accurate, but you can't go on from there. And in some cases, they are trying to not make a decision. They're trying to get out of the sale. They're trying to buy a different company's product instead of yours, whatever the case may be. But those are the situations you have to deal with. So you should always assume that in the question and answering process, that it is a hint as to what the real problems are. So in your case, Brian, you sell Facebook ads or you sell systems that help people create Facebook ads. If the customer said, but I heard that social media isn't where you should spend your ad dollars anymore. You should buy print ads now because that's where the really good stuff is. Or I should be advertising on email campaigns instead or whatever. That means that he probably got a hint from a competitor. And it may not be a true competitor. Maybe he was just researching the industry, figuring out some things, but he may have actually been talking to somebody else who doesn't sell Facebook ads, but instead sells email systems and email ads and email lists. And they're telling him, no, don't listen to that Brian guy because he's telling you the wrong stuff. You need to listen to me. Now it's a quote unquote trap. If you answer it wrong, you potentially lose the deal. However, you know now that it's a hint as to what something else is going on. So the best way to answer that challenge or that question is to acknowledge it. Just say, let me make sure I understand your question. Just so repeat it back to him. Repeat it back to the buyer in your own language, using your own terms. and try to make sure that you're actually trying to understand the right question, because it's not unusual for a prospect to ask you a question incorrectly. They were trying to say it one way, but the way they said it, it made you think of something else. Understand though, they don't know your industry. You know your industry. So you immediately took that knowledge that you had, applied it to the answer in your head, and came to a conclusion that wasn't the conclusion that had anything to do with the customer. And I've seen this over and over again. You answer a question from a prospect and you give the wrong answer because you didn't think through the question the way he thought through the question. And this is primarily because you don't know where he is and he doesn't know anything about your industry. So my first suggestion is say it back to him. It also gives you a chance to catch up, to think, to relax. So by saying it back to him, now he or she has to repeat that question again, perhaps in a different way, clarify it a little bit more. That allows you to think a little longer. The longer you think, the better off you are. It's when you answer too quickly, you jump to a conclusion, you assume you know what he's talking about, you're going to really get yourself in trouble and maybe open up another can of worms that you just don't want to open up. So the first thing you should do is clarify the question. Ask him to repeat it. Say it back to him in your words. Do I have this right? Have a conversation about the question, not about the topic. The second thing you do, you should be thinking about as you're doing that process is think about if you give a wrong answer here, what is going to be his conclusion from the answer? Because you really want to understand what kind of an answer is he looking for. So you need to think about where does he want that answer to be? Because he wants the answer to be, yes, you're right, or no, you're wrong. Is it that blunt? Is it some shade of gray in between those two? So you need to think about that. And how do you put your answer out there in a way that appeals to his ego, appeals to his being right without insulting him and say, nope, that's a stupid question. You should never ask me that question again because you obviously don't know what you're talking about. This is why you should hire me. That could be the answer, but that shouldn't be the way you deliver the answer.
Right. And I can give a perfect example of that. I get this question a lot when I'm meeting with prospective clients. And the question will be kind of like your example. We heard that, you do all the digital stuff. You do the Facebook, the Google, the email. But what about like traditional media? TV, is that dead? What about billboards? Do people respond to those? And that gives me the opportunity to repeat the question back to him. I'm getting better at that myself. And you were totally right. That just gives you ample ability to hone in your own energy and not get flustered, because I get nervous when I'm in a sales situation. Like, it's just part of me. That's that anxious response. But it gives you time to play it back. And for this type of question, I just say, look, I'm not here to poo-poo any other form of media that I don't particularly offer, because there is an avenue for traditional media for certain companies and certain industries at certain times. But my recommendation here is that what we're prescribing is going to be more effective for you in terms of measurement, in terms of traction, and in terms of ROI. So it's one of those opportunities to just show your authority and your knowledge in the space, but also not just completely shut down their idea, because they could be genuinely curious, or how is often the case, they were on Google the night before a meeting and reading random blogs or posts or articles that say, hey, do this or do that.
Or maybe in the case of, since in your world, you drive by an empty billboard and it's never empty. This usually has an advertisement by the billboard manufacturer saying something to the effect of, see, you read my ad, right? Or you wrote
billboards work.
Yeah, exactly. So you need to be really careful, because that's what I call a trap. So in my book that I wrote, Eliminate Your Competition, I talk about trapping and I talk about getting out of traps. And that's the real challenge here, because that is a trap. That is no, I should spend my money on billboards rather than Facebook. And there are reasons why you would want to spend your money on billboards. There's no question about it. They offer a benefit in the world of advertising. There are a certain percentage of companies that's the right way they should advertise. However, you should have, through just experience of selling your product, and the more you sell your product, the better off you are, you should have reasons why a billboard ad won't do this for you. And the more you know about your competition and what they might be saying, billboard ads work. See, you read this, which is essentially what they all say when they're advertising, or park bench ads, same kind of thing. Yeah, there's 384,000 cars that go by this park bench every year. Wouldn't you like them to see your ad as well? Or whatever they say. But There's certain things that billboards are really, really bad at. Good luck having a call to action like, you should do this now. That just doesn't happen. You have to go by a billboard like 16 times just to remember the phone number that's on the billboard.
Hmm.
Those are the conversations. So billboards are good for some things, but they're not good for call to actions, or they're not as good, I wouldn't think. They're not good for more in-depth information. There's only so much information you can give it on a billboard while the guy's driving down the street. You're gonna have to go by it over and over and over just to get it. And by the time the month is up and now it's a new billboard ad, right? So how good did it really do? So those are types of things that you should explain and set up. But then you should always think of, and this is where skill gets better. The more times you do this, the better off you are. You should then ask them another question. You should ask a question that drives them away from the billboard question that you know is pertinent, because now they're talking about other types of ads. So maybe you should ask a question about, would it be good if we had banner ads, or should we just do other message ads, or do messages and blogs, or you just want to be on Facebook, or whatever the case may be? All of those other types of digital ads, which are more in your wheelhouse, now you can direct a question back to that, and you can start making him think that way. That's a trap in reverse, or a way of trapping somebody else, because you've answered the question on the billboard ad. Now we're going to drive to some other method of advertising that is backing yours, that maybe is an option that we haven't discovered or we haven't dug into too much in your own product. It allows you to frame the question back. So if he's talking to the billboard advertiser, as opposed to just seeing the billboard that said you should buy a billboard ad, if he's actually talking to that person, you want to make him challenge the billboard advertiser with a question about Facebook ads, that you literally want to trip up your competition. Remember, in sales, it's all about everybody has to lose in order for you to win. Now, there's still a chance that you could have a deal done with a billboard advertiser and a deal's done with you in doing Facebook ads. There's still a chance he could do both. But if he only has money to do one thing, you want that money to go to you, which means the billboard advertised salesperson, he has to lose the deal. It's just pure and simple. It's not being mean. It is the call of the wild. It is what it is. You need to win. So you want to eliminate your competition. And one of the ways you do that is by asking the question to the customer after you've answered something, and it puts you in a frame of mind of, oh, so he's worried about diversification of message, or he's worried about this issue or that issue. You need to ask a question that's relevant to that, that your competitor can't answer. And you want to trip them up and make them not be as effective.
What's your ROI on the billboard? Every time, that's my question. And without fail, the business owner will not know, or they will know and they'll say it was bupkis, it did nothing.
Yeah. And that's a great example of, how do you prove your ROI? How do you track your ROI? All that stuff. Don't you want to spend your money where the ROI is important and is able to be tracked? And you can actually look at it at the end of the month, at the end of the quarter, at the end of the year. I spent this much on that ad vehicle and I got this much back. Isn't that more important to you, Mr. Customer? How does the billboard guy do that? Maybe there's some way that I don't know about. Matt, you should ask him that. How does he track his ROI? And that's a tough question for a billboard sales guy to answer. So those are ready-made systems. And you just talked about it just a second ago. You need to have some of those answers, or those questions built into your repertoire. You don't use them on your very first conversation. You use them when he asks about billboards. So that's the first part of doing that. Now, the question of just clarification questions, those challenges of having that conversation, a lot of times that is because you didn't do a good enough job all the way back in part one of what we talked about, and that was have a sales process. You didn't do a good enough job in discovery. So a lot of times when he's asking questions that are clarification questions that he doesn't know the answer to, he's confused, potentially you did not ask enough questions about his business and put him into the right frame of mind early on. So the harder you have with challenges and questions, and all these other questions come up and I get frustrated, the more time you spend on that in your sales cycle, you need to think about, what do I need to say on day one that makes that problem go away? Because a lot of the issues that you have with too many questions at the end, too many clarification questions, the guy just gets confused. He gets scared because he doesn't know, he doesn't understand. You haven't done enough of a good job early on in the sales process to set that up. So that's on the salesperson. And the salesperson needs to take responsibility for, wow, every time I go into a sales situation, I have 25 really tough questions that get buzzed at me at the end. The customer they get combobulated and they can't talk and I lose the deal. If that's the case, that's because you screwed up early and you need to really take a hard self-reflecting look at your own self as a salesperson. How well am I explaining my product? How well am I understanding the customer's issues and applying my product to solve those issues as opposed to just having a standard pitch? You're not really applying, you're not customizing your presentation to that customer's needs at the very beginning. So that's the big issue there. You're always going to have some clarification questions at the end. That's just a given. Somebody got a little confused. They just have, or they want to hear it again. They want to make sure that you're not lying. So if you say it over and over again, you're probably not lying because you don't remember your lies. And when salespeople speak, it's intended that salespeople are lying. And so we have to get over that by saying the same thing over and over again. That's just fact of life.
Yep. And a confused shopper or a confused prospect is not going to buy.
That's right. That's exactly
Just the
right.
way it works.
Yeah. So you need to be very clear in your message, be understanding, be able to apply your solution to their problem, which means you have to understand their problem. What is their problem going to be? In the case of the person asking questions about the billboard, and if you want to talk about ROI, you really need to be asking questions at the beginning about what is your ROI? How do you track your ROI? So when he asks the billboard question, you say, you remember, Peter, when we were talking earlier on last week, we were talking about ROI. You said ROI was important to you, right? So you just don't ask how do they measure it, but you actually set yourself up early on in the conversation about how important is ROI into your marketing budget? How important is it to track that? How do you feel when that doesn't happen? So then when the billboard question comes up, you can go back to it and reinforce it real easily.
Right. And that gives you the opportunity to use their words with them. Again, not using their words against them or for them. It's, you said, sir or ma'am, that ROI was important or that this was your ROI. And they'll be like, yeah, I said that. And then you can continue on and it's just reinforcing what they already stated. They can't deny that. Not that they would, but it also proves that you're listening and that you're establishing that rapport by repeating back what they've already stated. So it's a win-win.
And that conversation of making sure you're doing the right things up front to make your job at the end easier is actually the second point of our conversation today. And that is creating and sustaining sales momentum. Because you really want to think about what can I do early on to make the end easier? And when things are difficult at the end, when price is an objection, when capability or product fit are an objection at the end, you didn't do enough things at the beginning. And once again, go back to the first episode that you and I recorded. Part 1, we talked about sales process. And you really have to have a sales process and you need to make sure that you cover your bases. There's an old saying in sales that the person that won is the happiest salesperson in the deal. The second happiest salesperson should be the first person to lose. The person that says, Mr. Customer, you're not a good fit. For what I sell and for what your needs are, you should go with somebody else because I don't think I can solve your problem. That person that says, I'm going to lose this deal no matter what, and they understand exactly what's going on in the customer's head, matched up. If I was that customer, I wouldn't buy my product. If you can get to that point and that confidence in your product that you could say, Mr. Customer, I need to not be here. I can't help you. You should talk to Joe down the street. Let me make an introduction to one of the other people in my industry that might be able to help you because I can't help you. I'm not the best fit. I think something else is. I think you should buy billboard ads because I think that's the best fit for your budget, for your needs. So, Mr. Customer, I'm going to introduce you to my buddy who sells billboard ads and he'll take great care of you. That person is the second best person in the whole sales cycle. Yes, you didn't get the order, but you also went and closed a different order. So you really need to think about creating and sustaining your sales momentum by asking really good questions up front. A lot of people say that all of the reasons that you lose a deal happen in that first meeting. All those things that you didn't pick up on, that you didn't follow up on, that you didn't understand, if you would have understood them at the very first meeting, you could have addressed them along the way. So a great discovery at the very beginning of your sales process where you're asking majority of the questions, you're doing very little talking, you're just asking questions. You're not sharing a lot of information, you're just asking questions. I said this over and over again. What's the most important about discovery? Ask questions, listen, take notes, and understand. That's the important thing about discovery. And with discovery, you can then create those situations later on that allow you to sell the deal faster and with less headache. And by building in the appropriate ROI early on in the process, and I know, Brian, you just talked about ROI of the ads, but ROI is part of the whole sales process. Every buyer thinks that if I give you money, it's going to do so much for me that I'm going to make more money afterwards. I'm either going to make more money by more revenue coming in or more efficiencies in my organization, whatever you happen to be selling. But everybody says, I want to give this salesperson some money in exchange for a product or service, but that product or service is going to make me more profitable. Because if it's not, they're not going to do the deal. So at some point, you have to do that analysis. The earlier on you build up the information about that, and the earlier on you explain how that money situation is going to go, then the biggest challenge is your price is too high. That's the biggest single question that people say, and the one that most people freak out on. Well, it's not. It's not the most important thing because you just objected it. You just took care of it. And the ROI for your investment, look, it's 500%. You give me $1 over the course of the next year, you're going to get $5 in return. Why do you care if it's $1 versus $1.25? Why do you care? There's not an investment that you can do better. I had a client one time, and this client's no longer a client. They graduated. So in my world, where I'm a fractional VP of sales, I work with a client for a while. Then at a certain point, they need to be on their own. They need to be doing it themselves. And so I call it graduation. So they graduated really well. But this client, when I first talked to them, they had a product. They had several products, but they had a product that had a 28-day ROI. A 28-day ROI. And after 28 days, that product was paid for and the customer was making money on it for the rest of the year. And the product lasts for 2 or 3 years. It was a mechanical product, so the product lasted 2 or 3 years. 28 days. Well, you know what the first thing we did? We raised the price because 28 days isn't long enough. Because there's nothing that company could have purchased from anybody that got a 28-day return. It was the best investment that company could have ever made. And at 90-day return, 84 days is what we were targeting. At 84 days, it was still the best investment that company could possibly do. There's very few things that you can pay for in a business that will pay for itself in 84 days. So we raised the price. Now, we didn't go all the way from 28 days to 84 days. That would have been a 3x increase in price. So we didn't do that overnight. And we took a while to get there. We added some more features to the product to make it actually more valuable, actually increased its profit margin as well. That company has a 25% increase in sales, which is great, a 300% increase in profitability, which is amazing. And that's by just, hey, our price is going to go up. And when our price went up, that didn't mean we had less customers. That didn't mean that we had a harder time closing deals. It just meant that that customer didn't get a 28-day return. They got an 84-day return. And they still sold just as much product.
That's awesome.
It's awesome. So understanding what their business was and what they were doing, that's the creating of the sales momentum. And that's the part that you have to do early on in the entire situation. Now, the last thing we were going to talk about was implementing and scaling sales strategies. So one of the things that sales managers, meaning owners of companies, struggle with is I can sell it, but I can't hire anybody else to sell it. So we talked earlier, we've talked several times about trust. Sales is about transferring trust from the company to the prospect. The challenge for most small companies, and Brian, I'm going to pick on you here because I think you have this challenge. You know how to trust your product because you trust what you do. You know it's fantastic. And so it's relatively easy for you to look your prospect in the eye and say, Mr. Prospect, believe me, it's going to work. And you trust the product, you trust in your capability, you trust in what you've learned how to do so much that that trust is just obvious. You wear it on your face. And so it's easy to get the customer to the prospect to believe you at that point. But now you want to scale. Now you want to hire a salesperson to do that for you. First of all, that salesperson doesn't own the company like you do, Brian. So therefore, they have to trust that Brian's going to do it. By the way, they haven't met Brian yet because they're your salesperson. They're trying to do a deal without Brian because Brian wants to do something else. So now he's got to convey the trust that the company, that nebulous thing that I don't know, is going to sell. That's a much harder selling system than if Brian is selling it. It's much harder for a salesperson to sell the same product than the owner. However, you don't grow significantly unless you have other people selling for you. Just fact of life.
Mhm.
I had a great conversation with another company here in town. This company owner used to be a fantastic salesperson when he was a salesperson, when he was a young person. And as he was trying to grow his company, he got some advice. And the advice was, and I'm going to paraphrase this, but the advice was literally, are you better than any other salesperson you could hire? Yes. The owner of the company said, absolutely. I am the best salesperson in the world at selling this. There's nobody that can outsell me. That's a bit bragging, a little bit of a big ego. But then he got the second piece of advice, or the second question. Are you better than any three? So you can outsell three people? Yeah, I am so good that I can probably outsell three people. Wow, that's really big. That's pretty amazing. How about five? Can you outsell five? Ooh, no, I don't think I can outsell five. Can you outsell 10? No way I can outsell 10. How about 20? Can you outsell 20? Now the answer is obvious, right? Of course you can't outsell 20, right?
Right.
How big do you want to grow? And the answer was very, very big. He wanted to be one of the biggest companies in the city. In fact, he wanted to be one of the biggest companies in his industry. And he goes, so the advisor looked at him and goes, how are you going to do that with just you selling? Well, I can't. And he goes, then here's what you have to understand. You have to understand that you have to live through 3 salespeople selling less than you. You have to live through that process so you can get to 5, because you're not going to start with 5. You're going to start with 1 or 2. Then you're going to have another one, then a couple more until you get to that point. So that scaling thing means that they're not going to be as efficient as you are as the owner of the company, because they're just not. And you have to have processes in place, which is what we covered in part 1. You have to use a CRM, which is what we covered in part 3. You have to figure out how to do effective communication and how to put out trust and transfer trust, which is what we covered in part 2. You have to combine all of those together and instill those into your sales team, so your sales team can now represent the company. And is any one of them going to be as good as the CEO? Probably not. But the CEO has an advantage that every salesperson doesn't have. And I talked about that just a second ago. And that is, the CEOs can look at the customer and say, trust me, I'll get it to work. Trust me, I'll make you happy. Trust me, this will make you money. Now, that doesn't mean that for a big, big order, the CEO of the company won't be involved, because he probably should be, or she probably should be. That transfer of trust is very important no matter what. And there's going to be some deals out there that the salesperson can't close without the CEO being involved, without the owner of the company being involved. What you want to have done to truly scale and truly grow is you want to have that salesperson close the little deals, and then have the salesperson close the medium deals. And then as you grow, it takes a mega deal for a CEO to get involved. In my career as a salesperson, the CEO would only be involved in deals that are definitely move the needle type deals. When I say move the needle, you close the deal, you took a look at the speedometer, and it moved because of that one deal. You look at the dial on the KPIs on the scoreboard, it definitely moved. We can see that it was at this point, we closed the deal. Now it's significantly higher. It's a move the needle kind of deal. It also may be a deal that is brand new in a different industry. It's brand new in that marketplace, brand new in a new geography, whatever the case may be. The CEO still has to get involved in those, and that's perfectly fine. Every CEO will do it. You don't think that major corporations don't go to sit in front of Apple and have conversations with their CEO? Absolutely. Where are you thinking the company's going to go in the future? We're about ready to buy 10,000 Macs. What do you think? He's going to have that conversation.
Right.
Guarantee big companies on a regular basis meet the CEO of Oracle. They meet the CEO of major corporations all the time because it's important. So CEOs don't get out of the role of sales, but they don't worry about the transactional sales. And that's where you really need to think about, how do you grow your company to do that? And I'm going to tell you something that small businesses really struggle with, and that is being able to use what I call an overlay model. Big corporations know how to do this. They put a lot of knowledge into a few people about any particular product. Those few people are the experts that get brought in to help close the deal. The standard salesperson doesn't know how to do all those things. They don't know everything about it. So just like they would bring in the CEO, they bring in Brian to talk about Facebook ads and get that last little push. As you grow to a certain point, even that information about how do Facebook ads really work and how does all that stuff really work, you don't want your CEO, your salesperson knowing all that information, and you don't want your CEO going after medium-sized deals. So as you grow, you have to put in a layer of expertise that is below the CEO, but above the salesperson. The salesperson should be tasked with building relationships, transfer of trust, understanding what's going on with the customer. They should not be involved in solving the problem. Other people have to do that. So as you grow, and this is what you have to get good at when your company grows, when you get to 5 salespeople or 10 salespeople, which 2 of them can you turn into the expert in that industry, the expert in that technology? And they can then help the other 8. And sooner than later, now they're helping the other 16 because you just doubled your revenue. You only had to put a lot of information to 2 people to make that happen, but you had to do that in order to grow. And that's where a lot of sales organizations stall out at 5 or 8 salespeople because they expect all of them to be able to do everything. And you can't do that. You have to take some of them and make them better than the others and use their expertise to grow it. And yes, that means you might have to pay 2 people for a deal. You paid the salesperson that opened the deal and made that all the transaction happen. You paid them most of the commission on that deal, but you paid somebody else a little bit of commission on all of the deals. And that's where a lot of companies struggle when they talk about scaling to the next step because they got stingy. It's like, well, he didn't do all the work, so therefore he doesn't get the commission. Well, that means that he's going to leave, right? Or you're not going to get the benefit of scaling. Scaling only happens when you can put trust into other people and let them do it. And that is kind of the overarching factor of everything I've said in the last 4 episodes is sales is about trust. So CEOs, you have to get your customers to trust you, your prospects to trust you. You have to deliver on that trust after they buy. But then as you grow, you absolutely need to transfer trust to your own employees. And you need to trust them to help others and to get help from others and build that organization of trust within the organization so that the salesperson can trust that somebody else can answer that question. And I don't have to go to the CEO. And the CEO can do CEO things instead of doing product trust issues.
And when you have your internal trust infrastructure built out, now everybody, all the stakeholders involved from sales to the production team to the CEO to the other experts on staff, everybody knows that because I can trust this person, I can trust that person, that now as a salesperson, I can go out and more easily sell this because the prospect recognizes the trust that I have in my team and that I have in the ownership and that I have in our fulfillment team. And that makes the process, that transfer between the prospect and the salesperson that much easier because the salesperson can wear that on their sleeve. Even though I'm not the expert in XYZ, I trust that our experts in-house can do that. And if the customer needs an answer or the prospect needs an answer on that, I've got a guy or a gal in the business who has that answer and I will provide it for them. But I think that's a good point where it seems you're saying that the salesperson does not have to have and will possibly never attain the same knowledge that the CEO, that the owner will have. Because that is just the business owner's brain. They built everything from the ground up. They know every square inch of this business. But you don't need to fall into that false belief that the salesperson has to have that level because it's just not needed. It would be overkill.
That's exactly right. And by putting all of that information into the salespeople, you actually have them doing things that they shouldn't be good at. They should be good at developing a relationship with the customer and understanding the customer's needs so they can properly apply the right resources to solve those needs. If you say, no, you have to be an expert at everything, you're never going to be successful. So most people listen to this podcast live in a building. They bought the house, they bought a condo, they're renting a house, they're renting an apartment, whatever the case may be. But you live in a building. Most people living or have that situation. They probably had a transaction with a salesperson to get that done. Either a real estate agent, a buying agent, a rental agent, whatever. There was a salesperson that was involved in that process. How many of those salespeople that they had involved in that buying process that they talked to for all their competitors as well, how many of those salespeople could actually build that house? And in fact, even if they could swing the hammer and make those things stand up, how many of them knew how to do all the wiring? How many of them knew how to do all the HVAC and the plumbing? None of them. In fact, very few people can build a house all by themselves and have all the skills and all the knowledge to build the entire house. Even if you're a good plumber, you probably aren't really good at putting in drywall and putting down paint and putting in carpet. You probably are not really good at all those other things. Sure, I know handymen that can probably say, yeah, I can do it all. But those guys are few and far between.
Jack of all, master of none.
Yeah, exactly. And they're not the best at any of those, exactly what you just said. So they're conversant, but they're not skilled. They may not be certified in the right things to be certified to do all that work as well. They may not be able to give you a warranty on that. So that's what you're doing in sales. That's what you're doing in your company when you're trying to scale. How many plumbers do you need? How many tradespeople do you need that can install an HVAC system? How many people do you need to wire the house? And then how many people do you need that can swing a hammer and put nails in pieces of wood? You got to figure it out. And that is how you scale, by understanding that the person that's putting up the drywall is going to be a different person and have different skills, and is just as important, though, as the electrician that wired the house to begin with. Because nobody's going to buy a house, nobody's going to rent an apartment if it doesn't have electricity, and nobody's going to do the same thing. They're not going to buy or rent if it doesn't have drywall on the walls. Just a fact of life. You need all of that to make it work. So as you're scaling your company, you need to think about, how do I divide this workload up so that people can do what they're really, really good at, what they're really trained at, and they won't do the things that they're not trained at and they're not good at. And that does mean that you have to scale, because you know what? If I have to have an electrician on board in my company to build the houses that I need to build, if they have to be an employee, which most of them, of course, are not, they're a contractor. But if they had to be an employee, well, how many houses do I have to build per day, per week, per year in order to keep one electrician fully employed? So that's why you actually have contractors come in to do part of it, which is kind of what I do. It's kind of what you do as well.
Mm-hmm.
We do part of the job. I come in and I help companies run their organization, be more effective in sales. You come in and say, let me help you be more effective at generating leads and getting more inquiries into your company. So by using specialists, that's how you grow when you're going on. And then as you get bigger, you don't need to hire the external specialists, because now you use them so much that you need to dedicate that resource internally. So I don't think for you, Brian, you would think that IBM is a good prospect for you, because they probably have people on staff. And I picked on IBM. I could pick on General Motors, right? So they probably have people on staff that should know everything about what you do already, and they're employees because they just need that resource 5 times a day in all these other meetings and all these different projects they have. So they can't afford to outsource it to somebody else in that case. But when you're smaller, that's when you outsource it. And that's perfectly fine too.
Exactly. And that is precisely how I've been growing my business over the years. Is we serve high ticket home improvement companies with 5 major things in marketing, being website, Google services, ads and profiles, Facebook and Instagram, email marketing, and direct targeted mail, or targeted direct mail. And it's something where I am not the end all be all expert in all these areas. And in marketing in general, there's a million different avenues that if you claim to be the expert at all of them, I've never met someone who can claim that and be accurate with it. I know enough about a lot of different areas to be dangerous, but not to where I'm going to go take clients' money and confidently say, I can get you great results with XYZ platform. That's like the first person I ever hired out on my team handled the Google ads. I'm classically trained in Facebook ads, but in order to grow my business, I had a lot of prospects and clients asking for help on Google. So I said, you know what, I'm going to start offering that, but it's not going to be me who's the practitioner. There are experts out there that I can bring in as part of my team to serve that. So that's what I did with Google. Then naturally we moved into email, we moved into copywriting, we moved into web development. It was a natural progression. So I think that's a perfect example of how growing your team shows that you don't have to be the expert in everything that you do. And clients understand that too. They don't expect you to be the practitioner of every single thing that your business does. So I think that's definitely something you want to keep in mind when you're growing and scaling out your business and your sales process.
Yeah. And so for salespeople, Expecting a salesperson to be good at everything in the sales process, all the way from beginning to end, it's just not natural. So some salespeople are really good at breaking into accounts. Well, let them just break into accounts. Some salespeople are really good at project management, keeping that existing customer happy and growing at 10% every year. That's great. Then set that up. Some salespeople naturally try to understand everything about the technology. If they were selling for you, Brian, they naturally understand all those things about ads and everything else. Well, great. Make them the overlay expert to all the other salespeople in the organization. Have a bunch of people that are opening up accounts. They don't know all the answers. They go, hey, Joe, I need that help. Joe's your smart guy that gravitated to knowing more about the product. Have him come in, explain those details. He spends 1 hour with every customer, and then he's done. He allowed that trust to be transferred, and then he didn't have to go do it anymore. So he could go from client to client to client, prospect to prospect, and just build up that reputation. He also can afford to learn more about that issue. And so he's always the expert. And you can pay him to spend time learning and being the expert and being the one that's the most qualified person in the room to talk about that. But he's probably not very good at opening up accounts. That's the skill that somebody else has. So at the beginning, 2 or 3 salespeople, yeah, you got to be jack of all trades. And you got to accept that they're not going to be as good. Just like my story of the other owner, not as good as me because I know everything. But you can't grow if that's the case. Eventually, you have to scale. Eventually, you have to trust others in the organization, and you have to give power in the organization to allow that to happen. And that's where a lot of companies fall apart on the growth thing. That's why companies get stuck at $10 million or $20 million in revenue, because they just can't think about scale the right way. And that's where I'm going to end my conversation. So I help with all those problems. I help with every problem we've talked about. If people want to come talk to me and get advice, I'm happy to do that. I'm sure in the show notes, Brian, you're going to put all my contact information, but I'm happy to help anybody that has a problem that wants to learn, how do I scale? How do I grow? How do I create an organization that can sell my product reliably, consistently, so that my company can employ more employees, get bigger, get more profitable, and I can sell the company at the end of my lifetime and be happy about that.
Absolutely. Well, Sean, yes, this is a perfect place to wrap it up, and we will make sure we have all your contact information in the show notes and in our show description. I'd like to leave our listeners with one final thought to wrap up our 4-part series on sales fundamentals that every business owner should have. What is one thought from you, Sean, to really bring this all together and leave some words of encouragement with all our listeners out there who maybe have a business, might be starting a business, or getting close to that point of taking that first leap and hopping into entrepreneurship?
One thing, man, that's tough.
I put you on the spot.
I will tell you that revenue solves all problems. So the more revenue you bring in, the more problems that are inherent to your company that the director of operations doesn't know what they're doing. You can't write the right software if you're a software company. Revenue solves all problems. The more customers you're talking to, the more revenue you're bringing in, the more prospects you have, you'll get through all those other problems because they're solvable. The hardest problem most companies have is finding customers and closing deals and getting customers in the door. So spend a lot of resources, a lot of time thinking about bringing in revenue. You'll worry about the other problems. Those problems will get fixed. You'll write the software correctly. You'll work out all the bugs in your mechanical design, whatever your product is that's going to be there. Revenue is what's going to make the difference. So spend time getting good at sales, creating a sales organization, trusting that sales organization. And if there's one thing I had to tell you that you have to give to every salesperson, the better salespeople are all proactive. They are thinking at the beginning of the sales process, what do I have to do in order to get the deal closed at the end of the process? So being proactive, thinking ahead, thinking through your problems is very, very important. Sales is not an art and it's not a skill. It is both. And so you have to do it over and over and over in order to be successful. Part-time salespeople or bad salespeople, don't do that. Be good at your job. Be good at what you do.
Awesome. Sean, you're a gentleman and a scholar. Thank you so much for putting this 4-part series together with us. Couldn't have asked for more from a better guy. So thank you very much.
I appreciate it, Brian. This has been a lot of fun. Good luck in the podcast. Good luck with your own personal business and your family. And I look forward to watching you grow. And you're fantastic. I enjoy being with you.
I appreciate it. Thank you, brother. All right, folks, that is a wrap on our 4-part series, Sales Fundamentals That Every Business Owner Should Adopt, with Sean O'Shaughnessy. Thanks to Sean for dropping by and sharing all this wealth of knowledge with us on the podcast. I think there are so many things that you can go use, and hopefully you're taking notes and you can go implement in your business and really start kicking tail and taking names and take your business to the next level. As Sean noted at the very end, his last thought was, to paraphrase, cash is king, revenue is king. Without revenue, without cash, you don't have a business. In order to get that cash, get that revenue, you've got to be able to sell. So hopefully you can take this information to heart and really turn your business into a well-oiled sales machine. So thank you all for joining us again on the Millionaire University podcast. We'd love to chat with you, so reach out to us on your preferred social network. We are there. We'd love to connect, or reach out to us. Send us an email at support@millionaireuniversity.com. If you want to hear something on one of our future episodes, or if you have a question on anything we've discussed, reach out. We'd love to connect. We will catch you on the next episode of the Millionaire University podcast.